What's up, Laker fans? Welcome to the Laker Film Room Podcast. I'm Pete, joined by Darius, and a little Lakers news in the dead of the summer, but not the kind that we want to hear. Mike Bresnahan on the Lake Show podcast reported that Vando may not be ready for training camp or the preseason, D. And so we just talked fairly recently about he's an important guy if the Lakers want to get to where they want to go. And an injury early on or missing camp and all that doesn't, mean that he's not going to help at all this season, but it's certainly some bad news, especially with a new coach trying to integrate into new ideas, new systems, and all of that. And so he went from being, available in game 5 or whatever, game 4 of the playoffs to possibly not being available. This is something, I have been bothered by for a while about the Lakers reporting of injuries and how they message that. And so he also said that Vando did not have surgery. I had heard that he had, but Brez would know better than I would. So D, some bad news here to start September, 4 weeks from when we start playing basketball.
Yeah, this is bad news indeed. First and foremost, we don't need to speculate on what it's like for the Lakers to not have Jared Vanderbilt very early in training camp or the preseason. This is what happened last year. And injuries lingered for him. When he came back, he showed how valuable he could be. And then he had what I thought was it was a short stretch, but his best stretch as a Laker. And that's a time that includes some pretty good highs from after when he was acquired that same season after the trade deadline. And then he got hurt again. And the Lakers, without Jared Vanderbilt, shift very much towards we're an offense team.
Yeah.
And look, you can win games being a very good offense team and a middling to slightly below average defensive team. But we all understand what the Lakers' goals are. And achieving those goals requires a certain amount of balance in terms of how good you can be on both sides of the ball. And Jared Vanderbilt is important to the Lakers being a good defensive team. So just looking at the on-court stuff first, hopefully he is ready. Mm-hmm. He might not be. That's usually a nice little runway for he's not going to be. And there's a peddling of that. Not that this is coming from the Lakers organization, but just in general, folks around the team. It's just hearing Vando might not be ready. We're both familiar with how that sort of starts to linger around the org a little bit. So I don't know, man. That's my starting small forward if I'm building out the lineup. And so
Me too.
I would be having this reaction in general for any starter. That said, because his skill set is unique amongst the top 7 or 8 players on the roster, and how important I think that unique skill set is towards creating lineup balance and providing support for the team's best players, this is kind of rough. And I'm hoping it's not as bad as what it could be, but my mind naturally goes towards a place where things are not as good.
It hurts. There's no way around it. Now we'll see, and we'll see how long he's out for if he is. But that was part of the story of last season that set us off on a different course. Is that he is an important bridge player that helps out both the stars and the backcourt, and kind of covers for weaknesses or for a level of motor and size and athleticism that's why he's that guy at the 3. That's the position right in the middle of your front court and your back court that links them together and was really important, I think, to this team. The Lakers, very foolishly, one of the first strategic mistakes they made were let's replace him with Taurean Prince. And after seeing that for a few games, they very much should have made that switch because very different type of players. And so that balance that you're talking about, you can go too small, for example, I think Max Christie is going to be more important with Vando going out because so many of the Lakers' role players are better on offense than they are on defense. And Max is a little more balanced in that respect while still being able to hit a shot. But I think that if you put D'Lo, Austin, and Max, that trio together next to AD and LeBron. I like all those players, but that's too small at the three. And as Max being a guy who I think is better at defending guys that don't have a size and strength advantage over him, that's the type of mistake that I think we absolutely would have made last year that I hope Redick sees. Now, as soon as we went to Rui, the team won 70-something odd % of its games. Some of that was just a natural, like, oh crap, we got to put our foot on the gas if we want to make the playoffs for sure. But it was just obvious from the moment they did it, D, they were a much better team. So this to me makes Rui the obvious starter going into camp, if this is the case with Vando. But it does set the Lakers off on a bit of a course that maybe they would have wanted to go a different direction if Vando were healthy.
Yeah, and this is where Redick's first tests start to come in terms of like lineup and roster management and what are considered like short-term solutions versus long-term solutions. We talked about Draymond Green on our last podcast, and I'm old enough to remember, and I've been in the Bay Area for long enough to remember the David Lee, Draymond Green issue. David Lee was a starter. David Lee got hurt. Draymond Green was inserted. And then Draymond Green's style of play fit better with that group. And he ultimately won the job long term, and then David Lee ended up no longer being a part of the Warriors, like in the longer term. And that's a coaching decision. The coaches see what's working and what's not. They understand that the player who got hurt was a very good player, but the replacement was a bit of a better fit. This I see as like a little bit of the opposite. I see Vando's skill set as being so vital to this group, and Redick is going to have to make an interesting decision. So a lot of ifs coming right here, Pete. But yeah, if Vando is not ready, and if Rui is the natural replacement, which I agree that he is, and if Rui plays well enough to be a starter when Vando is healthy, if Vando was the guy who I think should be starting.
And we don't know that Redick agrees with that, by the way. And even if I were to like that first season before a head coach takes over, every quote, you parse apart and so I've been very closely listening to everything that Redick says, and I've gotten the impression that he's higher on Rui than he is Vando. Like, that's one thing that stood out in his comments. It's like, I haven't heard much about Vando, but that might be because he knew that, hey, Vando's foot is still not doing great.
Yeah, like, there's so many things that we don't know around the framing of conversations. And if you would imagine the people who know most about the health and wealth of Jared Vanderbilt are the people who are in communication with him and are the people with the Los Angeles Lakers who employ him to play basketball. So it should not be a surprise if Jared Vanderbilt did not or did have surgery, was planning to or planning not to have surgery, what his status and progress is in terms of recovering either from whatever was ailing him last season without surgery or whatever his recovery process would look like after having surgery. No one should be more informed about that outside of Jared Vanderbilt and his doctors than the Los Angeles Lakers. And so if things are being framed a certain way, it very well could be informed by the fact it's just like, well, we know the dude who's healthy. He's the guy who's playing in the Olympics for Japan and looks pretty good as an offensive player and played basically a strong role for us last season. And honestly, offensively is a great fit for in terms of scoring the ball and shooting the ball and all of the things that we know that Rui can do. But in getting back to the point that I was making, I think the ceiling of this team is capped if your front court is LeBron, Rui, and AD, and then your backcourt is D'Lo and Austin. I said this a few pods ago, but I actually think that Rui and D'Lo are in a weird competition with each other around like who is going to be that other offensive player within the starting lineup, and that whoever is not going to be that guy should be replaced by someone who has a ton of defensive versatility and can help in all of the connecting ways on that side of the ball. And if Rui's in the starting lineup, then that player is absent if D'Lo is also in at the starting lineup. And it's one of the reasons why I've had such an affinity for Vando.
And I don't think we have those players on our team, though. So let's take a break and come back and keep talking about it.
Really quick here, Pete, before we go into a whole different area, I just want to say that you hinted at this. I'm not going to hint at this. I'm just going to be much, much more blunt around this. I think it stinks that the information around Vando potentially not being ready is coming from a podcast from someone who covers the team through a television partner rather than formally being out there based off of like forthright communications coming from the Los Angeles Lakers. I think it's weird that Vando would be technically available to play in the final game of the Lakers season. And if the Lakers would have beat Denver, seemingly his availability would not have been in question moving forward if he was available to play in Game 5. So if the Lakers win Game 5 and then win Game 6 and somehow advance against Denver, and they had been winning 70% of the time, right? They lost playoff games, but I'm just saying, it wouldn't have been out of the question to me that the Lakers could have advanced. Would Vando have suddenly gone to not available with nothing changing? And if he did not have surgery and he's suddenly not available, then what changed? And if he's actually not able to play and he's not available to start the season, are we actually going to get detailed answers around that?
No.
And my sense is that we will not. And one of the reasons why I sense that we will not is because last season, I saw players listed as day-to-day who did not play for 2 weeks at a time. There was a whole stretch of the season, Pete, where Jalen Hood-Schifino was listed as day-to-day or even not even necessarily on the injury report. No one was asking about him. He was a deep bench player, and if he was playing at all. But no one was asking, and then out of the blue, he needs back surgery. And then he's out for the season, and the lack of transparency around some of this stuff coming out from the team side is super frustrating from a fan perspective, especially. But even if you're trying to properly analyze the team and provide a type of level-headed coverage about the direction of where the team can go, it makes it super difficult if all of these things are sort of shrouded in secrecy and not really known to what degree things are or are not true, or how hurt a player is or isn't, or what actually is an accurate timeline for return, what the severity is or isn't. We went whole games sometimes with Anthony Davis just in the locker room without getting any official update as to if he was going to return, what was wrong with him, and all of that stuff. I don't know who is making the decisions around what information gets out there or does not get out there, but I must say it's a tough pill to swallow when news like this around Vando is just the latest example of this, but it's just like, why is it like this? And it's really tough for me to be like, oh, that's just the status quo, because it shouldn't be.
It's like this because of the leadership of the Lakers. That's the way they choose it to be. And that's why we need the people who cover the team as reporters, which I do not, but the people who do that. Like, one of the things that is sort of a game by game tradition is when the injury report comes out, which that's usually 5:30, a lot of people who cover the team will be like, hey, this is the status. This is the injury report for the next day. Who's listed day-to-day, who's listed questionable, yada, yada. And like you said, the JHS situation, the Lakers are going to put that out and they aren't going to tell you anything. This is something that I internally complained about multiple times this season, or last season, was that I didn't think that we were honest on how we messaged stuff. And it is how it is. It's the decision that they're making. And so that's why you have reporters. And it isn't just a reporter's job to just be like, this is what the team I cover says, and face value and just put it out to everybody. And so props to Brez for doing some digging. That's going to have to be the case. And yeah, but it is frustrating, D, as a fan.
Yeah, I don't want to extend this rant any further than what I already did, but part of understanding how good your team is or isn't is going to be based off of how healthy your team is or isn't. And I guess internally the argument can be made, well, we know. And so that's all that matters.
So why does it matter to tell the fans? Does it?
There are so many factors that go in to that. The league is in bed with gambling, for example. Like, they're actively in bed with gambling. One of the league's chief partners is ESPN. I listen to a ton of ESPN podcasts. You know who almost always sponsors segments on those things? Or especially, so outside of ESPN, you'll hear things like FanDuel and this, that, and the other. But inside ESPN, I'll listen to Zach Lowe's pod. I'll listen to the Hoop Collective pod, and they will actively tout, oh, well, the latest over-under on ESPN Bet is for this team to win X number of games. And it's just like, okay, well, you've got a league partner, ESPN, touting their betting service, ESPN Bet, and they're talking about over-unders. You know what's going to impact a Lakers over-under? Is how healthy one of their top 7 or 8 rotation players is and whether or not he's ready for training camp. One of the things that if you're going to have like an informed fan base, which I think is important, then there's a certain amount of transparency that I think is required. So the gambling piece is just one piece of that, right? But it's just like, I don't know, man. Do you have a bunch of other reasons?
Yeah. Well, just put the money aside, just as a fan, as a customer of the product, making it an enjoyable experience for your fans. Part of it is just setting a level of expectations. Like, in my opinion, the way they should have messaged the Vando injury last year was, because I know there was a level of uncertainty about like if it's going to heal well or not. And there's a way to communicate that to the fans, a level of like, we don't know, and don't get your hopes up that he's going to come back. Like, it's possible, but don't get your hopes up. That I think that would have been a much better experience than Jared Vanderbilt is on track and making progress data. You know what I'm saying? It's sort of like leading fans on in a way where I can deal with like, hey, with that sort of explanation of we don't know for sure, but it might take, there's a good chance that he's not back. And going from there, I think that's just a better experience for the fans.
The idea of being out indefinitely to me is much better than progressing as normal. Darvin used to say a bunch.
It was obviously a coached up phrase. Like it was hey, if they ask about this, this is what you're supposed to say.
Also, too, like this is all part of the plan. Darvin used to say that a lot. Mm-hmm. Progressing as expected. Those phrases don't mean anything to outsiders because I don't know what the expectations are. So if you're telling me progressing as expected against what? And so these aren't questions that are going to be asked on a day-to-day basis because honestly, I don't think you're going to get anywhere. I don't think you're going to get a straight answer.
That's why I'm saying you got to do digging. Don't ask the team. They're not going to be straightforward with you.
And so for me, the fan stuff is also one of those things where it's just like one of the things that happened last season that bothered me about this. And here I go again when I just said 5 minutes ago, I'm not going to extend my rant. And here I am again. I didn't quite care whether or not like Cam Reddish was going to play or not. I thought other people should have been playing in front of Cam Reddish. And so, but whatever. That's neither here nor there. What was interesting to me, though, was how Cam Reddish could miss several games, come back and play a quarter, and then not play the rest of the game, miss a game, come back, play a half, not be available the second half. And that song and dance went on for what felt like a month, 6 weeks. He finally missed an extended period of time, but I think over the last like week and a half or 2 weeks of that extended stretch, he was listed as day-to-day.
Gabe Vincent, another example.
Well, Christian Wood.
Yep.
He came out of the All-Star break as...
We didn't know he got hurt in the first place. Yeah.
Like, what happened to you? And then like, wait, he had surgery? Like, where does this stuff come from? For me, it's just one of those things where it just feels wholly unacceptable that this is accepted practice across the league. I know that this happens in more places than just the Lakers, but we're not the More Than Places Film Room podcast. We're the Laker Film Room podcast, right? So our focus is where it is. Personally, I would just and I would expect there to be a certain amount of this is what it is. And you can be honest without spilling all of the beans.
I get it. We don't need it. And it's people's health, right? It's somebody's health. We don't need to get into all of that. But there is a certain amount of like leaving fans in a place of uncertainty that sucks. And if you're just like, well, it doesn't matter if you know, we know, it's like, all right, cool. Good to know that you feel that way. Let's take a break, come back and get back to the basketball. So yeah, D, this does set us off on a bit of a path forward, but I want to take a bit of a more optimistic turn on this. With JJ Redick coming into his first season and having, I have a clearer idea of what he wants to do on offense than he wants to do on defense. And it's a lot more complicated to do it around Jared Vanderbilt being a prominent part of your rotation than it is without. Within that same pod, Reddick expressed a certain degree of excitement about Max, saying that Dalton Connect has bulked up a little bit. And there's just been a great sort of everybody showing up to work over the course of the summer, which was one of my first checkpoints for this team, D, was does that culture start to crackle around El Segundo and in the gym, and guys showing up, getting their work in, there being a routine that's established while also in a vision of building toward long-term goals. We'll see how it looks when the rubber hits the road, but reports, and this 'tis the season for such things, but reports are so far so good, and it's great to hear. Rui, I think, fits into, we already saw a great offense in the regular season emerge that I would love to see, hey, what if that's the plan from day one to start Rui, right? I'm with you that I would rather start Vando for all reasons we've talked about, but it is what it is. From day one to start Rui, these are how we got to cover for him on defense. These are the challenges of chasing a shooter around. These are the matchups that, you talk about those beefier 4-5 types that Rui actually has the strength to be able to bang with them a little bit. How can we account for that? Can we run a little bit of zone here? What are the personnel groupings? But that's part of the value and fun of the regular season that was killing me last year, D, that we weren't exploring it to that same degree. And so talk to me a little bit about that. We saw a great offensive lineup toward the end of the season that sputtered out in the first round of the playoffs, but there is certainly something there to build off of.
Yeah, and this is where not knowing exactly what Reddick's plans are difficult. Right. And so a part of what I'm doing here in some of my skepticism is projecting forward only what we know, which is built on things that in theory are going to be changing. And so is it right to project forward certain things based off of factors that may not be exactly the same?
Yeah.
Right. And so even you right now bringing up the idea of playing more zone. What happens too if Rui is not the only other big on the court next to LeBron? One of the lineup types that I appreciated the most was
LeBron, Rui, Hayes.
Yeah, was LeBron, Rui, and Hayes. And it was a certain amount of like, oh, well, Rui then is still put in a position where I'm like big and strong. And do you have enough athlete on the court to deal with a front court that looks like this? And towards the end of the regular season and in the playoffs, we didn't see many of those groupings. What Reddick's plans are around like lineup manipulation, and what if the thing that you said, like, what if it's just like this from the start? There's great value in learning what works and what doesn't very early on. There's also great value in getting off on the right foot based off of the personnel that's on your roster and doing that earlier in the season. And so one of the things that happened last season that I think scarred me and probably scarred a lot of Lakers fans was the idea of, okay, what's your roster balance? Oh, the roster's actually pretty balanced, actually. The guards are there, but there's 6 or 7 front court players. All of them can play. Right? When you talked about LeBron, AD, Rui, Vando, that's already 4 dudes that you think can play. We knew that Hayes could play. We knew that Wood could play. That's 6 dudes. And all of them feel like, hey, we can all fight for minutes against each other. And if all of them are healthy, there's a bunch of different looks that you could go to. What ended up happening was, though, Pete, is that Wood and Hayes got pitted against each other for minutes, and Rui and Wood, in some ways, got pitted against each other for minutes. And when Vando got hurt, it was the one replacement that was looked at for him were basically 2 threes. Mm-hmm. When I say 2 threes, I mean like shooting guards / small forwards, not
Taurean Prince type.
Yeah, it was Taurean Prince. It was Cam Reddish.
Yeah.
Right? These are like way more like perimeter-based threes.
They're positioned down from what Vando is in reality, yeah.
Yeah, in terms of size and strength and those factors. And so I don't know what Reddick's thoughts are around this, but if Vando is not available, then what happens if you say, oh, well, the pool of players that we're pulling from in order to actually replace him in the context of actual minutes are actually Rui and Hayes. Functionally, in terms of minutes, because what we will do then is use the versatility of LeBron and AD to fill the other front court minutes, rather than pulling from the wing or guard group and scaling up. I don't know what Redick will do, but if the former is a part of the plan rather than the latter, I'll be much happier in terms of the direction of the team, even if I do have some potential bigger concerns about the team's defensive ceiling if Rui is the full-time starter, if that makes sense.
Certainly, I mean, I have concerns about that because we don't have enough good defensive players on the team. That's the what it comes down to primarily. And losing Vando hurts in that respect. And it also puts us at a point that we were always at in a way of if AD goes down, we are in deep trouble. But that just even more so now. I think that the two guys that could benefit from this are Jackson Hayes primarily and Cam Reddish. We have 11 guys that I could see in the rotation, and usually coaches don't want to play more than 10. And so I have thought that Jackson Hayes was likely to be the 11th guy squeezed out, although I would disagree with that. You know, my feelings about the Wood-Hayes convo, we'll probably do a whole pod on that, but I would suspect that Wood would have had the upper hand in that. I'm curious how Redick approaches point of attack defense, because part of the reason why Prince came into that spot and Cam Reddish came into that spot is in the construction of Darvin's defense, there was very much a main point of attack defender. Like, this is what you are responsible for every night. And there are several teams who do that. I think we are less equipped to do that based on our personnel. And that to me is the core strategic issue that Redick faces right now. That this is where I disagree with a lot of coaches is you have the choice to be able to go toward the concept that you have for your team, that all summer you've been plotting and scheming and, hey, we're going to do this and play that lineup. And then something happens and it's like, oh crap, maybe we can't build around that. And it sounds like they knew about this. So this isn't necessarily that, but things are always going to pop up that make you adjust. And you always have to adjust, I think, toward your personnel. So there are ways to be like, oh, I really want to play this sort of way. And you end up picking a way inferior player to fill up a spot as a result of, hey, I want someone, because Taurean Prince can guard on the perimeter much better than Rui can. And if that's the concept that you're so married to, and then it took us 50 games to get away from it and from playing that style of defense, because it's not like Rui came in for Prince and said, oh, just guard the point of attack guy. No, it was like, oh, I guess we can have Austin do it. Yeah, we can have Austin. Is it as good as Vando? Of course not. But is it better to have Rui in the lineup and all of the offensive benefit of that and then be a little worse on the defensive end? Yes, like it's a net benefit to, and so we're going to learn early on, and it's tough for a first-time coach. Or maybe it's easier. You're not as set in your ways, right? But Redick's going to have to be very pliable with how he looks to address this.
One of the things that I'm super interested in, Pete, and this is a whole podcast, so we're not going to get into this now with much depth. A very shallow point I want to raise is that I think this is less about what you think of your point of attack defense and how you want to deploy Anthony Davis.
Great point.
Because one of the fundamental things that a coach has to decide defensively is what do you do when defending the pick and roll with your big man? Most of what happens with the point of attack guy is going to be based off of what the guy who has the ball is good at doing.
So this is exactly why it wasn't as important. Like, that's why it was the wrong decision last year, is it's like, it's not as important to have that out there as it is to have other attributes.
Also, too, like, it's who has the most range to do something different? And if the answer is Taurean Prince, your answer is wrong. If your answer is Cam Reddish, your answer is wrong. If your answer is Anthony Davis, now we're starting to look more like we're moving in the right direction. And so last year, one of the cardinal sins that Darvin Ham made was he had an idea of what needed to happen from perimeter defense that was based solely on his perimeter players, because his idea of what he needed from his big man was finite. It was locked in. We are in a drop because we want to protect the rim and we want Anthony Davis in and around the paint. And if JJ Redick decides, no, It doesn't need to be that every single night. Will it be that some nights? It sure will.
Of course, it should.
But if on Tuesday night, it needs to be that he's in a drop, and on Wednesday night, it needs to be that he's like a little bit below the level. And if on Saturday night, it means that he has to be at or above the level. And Redick says that this is the style that we're going to play, and it's actually Anthony Davis dependent or big man dependent, right? Jackson Hayes can do this. Hey, Jackson Hayes, we're going to ask you to switch, or we're going to do this, because these are the things that we have to do in order to compensate for like not having an on ball. Like, I'm going to turn you, and
that's right. You still have options. Like, just because you don't have a dog on, heating up the ball doesn't mean that you can't still get quality perimeter defense. So there are other ways to solve those problems.
And these are things we don't yet know about JJ Redick.
That's right.
For all the talk and worry that we started the pod with about Vando, and believe me, like, I want Jared Vando to go healthy. I want him to play. I want him to be an important part of the rotation. But as the head coach, this is JJ's first kind of test. It's finding the alchemy within the units. And not only that, but finding the alchemy within the skill sets. And where can I turn the dials in this direction in order to get the outcome that we want if we don't have this specific skill as much on the court?
For sure.
And of all the things that Darvin got criticized for last season, I thought that was one of the finer points that we probably did not like dive into exactly. Like, bro, you're not turning the dials here. All you're doing is basically trying to put a new player into that same exact role.
The same idea that you had. Yep.
And we tackled it from that idea, but in reality, we could have been framing it a different way too. That's where I hope, if there's going to be improvement on the coaching side, it's that feel that I hope improves.
Hope so. All right. I think there's a lot of conversations to be had about the rotation that we can start getting into. I'd love to do that on Monday. Everybody have a great weekend. Until then, you've been listening to the Laker Film Room Podcast. We'll catch you guys next time.
James has got it in low to McHale. McHale wants to turn. He's double teamed. Just pass out in front. Broken up by Worthy. Tip to Magic. Worthy dies on his belly. Magic scores.
There's Magic, got it. Magic fires again. They will. Lakers win the game. The Lakers win the game. Rebound of Lonnie. 3 seconds left. Van Exel to win it. It's on the way. Good.
Kobe Bryant, 48 points, 16 rebounds. Shot with his 8th block shot that ties an NBA Finals record.
A lot of Laker fans sticking around for this.
You're seeing something that's very rare indeed. A Laker to get MVP chance
in Boston. Of all places.
Are you kidding me?
Kobe, hard to believe.
Are you kidding me? Unreal. Are you kidding me?
Lakers looking to push. Bryant spinning in the lane. Back for Gasol. Pretty pass. And it's back to a 3-point game.
Kobe Bryant picked up by Bell.
There's the move. 2, 1.
Miss it.
Unbelievable. For the victory. It's over. Shot clock now to 5. Bryant. Yes. And then with a little tap to Alvin Gentry.
Add insult to injury, Kobe. I mean, what a shot. I mean, you can't defend that. Are you kidding me? 2.1 seconds remaining. Denver a foul to give. Jokic trying to disrupt Rondo. He puts it in. Here's Davis, 4-3 in the win. Oh, it's good! Anthony Davis has won it for the Lakers! James again. Oh, he hits another one. LeBron James putting together a closing quarter against the Nuggets. This historic 2020 NBA championship belongs to the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers conquer the bubble, and banner number 17 will soon hang in the rafters.